easiest. Yeah. Here they come. Great to see everybody today. Welcome to this presentation about judicial clerkships with the Lane County Circuit Court. We're so excited to have you all here with us today. Just a couple of quick housekeeping matters. We're going to have an opportunity certainly for folks to be able to ask questions once we get further along in the program. And, you know, depending on the size of the group, we might just have you unmute. Otherwise, we'll plan to just use the raise hand function that I know you're also familiar with from classes. We are also recording this session for any students that weren't able to join us live today. So I just wanted to let you know that too. If you're welcome to drop questions in the chat directly to the host, those will go to Melissa Panter, our Career Center manager. And we're happy to ask those if you're not able to ask that yourself. So with that, I am really, really pleased to get to introduce you all to the Honorable Charles Zennaché. Judge Zennaché is joining us from the Lane County Circuit Court, where he serves as the Chief Criminal Judge. Judge Zennaché was appointed to the bench here in Lane County in 2007 after practicing law for over 19 years here locally. Prior to taking his seat on the bench, Judge Zennaché served as a member of the Eugene Police Commission and also worked as an assistant Crestwell Municipal Judge and an assistant Eugene City Prosecutor. In his role as Chief Criminal Judge, he has worked with many law clerks and judicial externs, including yours truly, and has served as a mentor to many members of our local bench and bar. He's a graduate of the University of Oregon School of Law and also earned his undergraduate degree in Natural Resource Management from the University of Connecticut. A little later in our program, we'll be joined by Judge Zennache's clerk, Whit Koch, who many of you might know. Whit is a 2020 graduate from the University of Oregon School of Law. He earned his undergraduate degree in international studies with a minor in history from American University. Before law school, Whit served as a legal assistant and paralegal in a private law firm and also with the United States Department of Justice's Criminal Division in the Fraud Section. And during law school, Whit served as a law clerk in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Additionally, he was named a Bowerman Fellow with our ENR Center and worked on the Native American Sovereignty Project. Since graduation, Whit has served as a clerk to Judge Zennaché. So with that, Judge, I'm going to mute and invite you to go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. Surprised you found out so much about me. I got to watch out what to put on the internet. So I'm Judge Charles Zennaché, as she said. I thank you all for being here today and expressing some interest in the clerkship program. I'm here to encourage you to follow up on that interest, and I'm trying to tell you all the good reasons why to do that. I'm going to shed a little bit more light on my background because it informs my decision or why I feel so strongly about the benefits of this program to new lawyers and why it might be a benefit to you guys. So I am a first person in my family ever to have gone to college. I'm the only person in my family ever have gotten an advanced degree. Nobody in my family, my father was an immigrant who never learned to read or write English. My mother had a high school education. The law has been very good to me in a variety of ways. It has opened many doors. It's a powerful tool for change and justice, and it's the job of being a judge is probably the greatest honor I've had as a lawyer. It is a chance to do the right thing every single day and get paid to do it. And I get entrusted by our society and our community to make very important decisions, whether they be who gets to raise the kids, or whether someone goes to prison or not, or whether it be, government can't do this thing, an injunction of some kind that stops an entity from happening, order protecting the environment. I get to do all of those kinds of things, and it is an amazing job to have. So I would urge you to, Aaron Stout, I'd ask you to mute your mic if you would, please. Thank you. All right. So, and I don't know how to mute people's mics. I just know how to call you out by name if I see your screen glow. So I'll do that. All right. So that's a little bit about me and the role and how I got to be here. So let me talk a little bit about the court. The Lane County Circuit Court is the trial level court in the state of Oregon. We are a court of general jurisdiction. That means we hear everything. So on the criminal side, it's everything from traffic tickets, which some of us do. I just did this morning at 8:30. I did 5 traffic trials, and all the way up to aggravated murders. And I've done cases that involve imposition of the death penalty. So on the criminal side, we do it all. On the civil side, that's true as well. We'll do anything from a small claims matter to a multi-million-dollar complex malpractice case, or a civil litigation between 2 large corporations over a design of some kind. We'll also sometimes deal with things that involve, in the family law arena, we do everything from BAPA orders all the way up to complex divorces in large cases dealing with many children. We also have a juvenile department that deals with the juvenile court proceedings, whether they be dependency or delinquency matters. And then we have a number of treatment courts that we operate as well. There are 15 judges here. 13 of them work in this building, the main courthouse downtown that I'm in right now, and another 2 work out of the Juvenile Court Center Justice, which is across from the Autzen Stadium there on Martin Luther King. We have now 1, but we're about to go up 1.5 judges assigned to the treatment court program for the not for that. As I mentioned, the law has been really good to me. I've been very lucky and fortunate in the law. But if I had to do all over again, the only thing I would do differently is I probably would go spend a year as a judicial clerkship somewhere, because that view inside, behind the curtain, the view into the courtroom, the view into what really makes a difference in a judge in deciding a case, watching different lawyers do different things and how they do, and learning by seeing those different observations would have greatly enhanced my career, especially early on in my career. It would have given me a lot more confidence whenever I walked into a courtroom. If you come over here, you're going to see a wide variety of trial lawyers and trial presentations. Some of them are going to be not very good. And you'll go, oh, I can do better than that, at least, Some of them will be, wow, I aspire to that, and I may never be able to do that. There are a few folks who you'll see in here that are just, this is a textbook. These people know what they're doing, and I'm not talking about litigation. I'm not talking about, let's file a bazillion motions and argue motions. I'm talking about trial work, actually coming into a courtroom and persuading some people that you don't know, strangers, of certain things, some of them complex things, medical malpractice, business litigation. Some of those are extremely complex issues that lawyers are acting as teachers and advocates and persuaders. Even on the criminal side, being able to convince somebody beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody committed a crime is a skill, or being able to vindicate somebody's rights when they're charged with a heinous crime is a skill to have, to how to persuade a jury, how to cross-examine a child witness. There you want to talk about a difficult thing to do. That is difficult things a lawyer will ever have to do. And some lawyers are really good at it and some are really bad. So one of the things you'll get out of doing this clerkship is you'll get a chance to observe the different skill levels and different things and say, wow, that worked, that doesn't work. The other thing you'll get is access to a judge. And I think most of my colleagues, if not all of them, are interested in mentoring as part of the roles of their clerks, for their clerks. I encourage my clerks to come in and ask me questions about things we see, talk about it. I talk about it with other clerks. I'm always open to that kind of discussion. And frankly, it's one of the things I miss about not having the externship program, because the externship program was for an opportunity for people to get a little taste of that and maybe be enticed to do it more. But it is an opportunity. I think my judges, my colleagues all think that that's really an important part of what we're doing. So you'll get a chance to talk to a judge about what's persuasive and what's not. What do you think about this motion or this objection or not? Was that done right? Did that work? And those kinds of things. What makes a difference in your reasoning? You'll also get a chance to help us make decisions that are really important. In the circuit court, it's not, because we're a trial court and because of the volume of caseload, it's not like an appellate court job where you're going to be spending months researching something and writing an opinion, and this is going to be much faster. Or you're going to get an assignment, it's going to go out and figure this out in a week. Maybe it'll be go out and figure it out in half an hour. Tell me what the main cases are. Come back. We'll talk about the cases. I'll read them, and we'll go in and we'll make a decision as best we can on what we have, because the volume of caseloads are pretty nonstop around here. Just is, there's thousands of cases that come through here every year, and we don't have the luxury of a great deal of time. Justice delayed is justice denied. On the other hand, we don't rush decisions, and we try to make the right decision. My biggest job is to make the right decision. Actually, every year my clerks who come to work for me get the talk, and I tell them my number one goal is to protect the integrity of the process, and that's their number one job, and my job is to make sure everybody who comes in here feels treated with respect and dignity, and I expect them to do that and comport themselves to a pretty high standard of behavior while they're in the courtroom. The second part of that is getting it right, and making sure we follow the law. It's not about what we think individually. And the last part of it is trying to do it in a timely fashion, because the folks who come to us often have disputes been going on for a long time, and they deserve and need a resolution. They want a resolution. That's why they're here. They've been unable to resolve it themselves, so they're here to ask us for that resolution. The other things you'll get is a chance just to, you won't just see what your judge does. Lots of the times, I call it our radio Lane County Circuit Court. We all have on our computers the access to the audio recording of the proceedings. Nowadays, when I first started, we had court reporters. We don't have that anymore. Everything is recorded on audio, and that's the official record. Well, anybody can listen into that who's in the courthouse. So when a really interesting trial is going on, oftentimes many people are listening. I tend to listen to trials as much as I possibly can. Anybody who knows me knows I'm a trial junkie. So I listen to them, and so do other people, and we'll talk about them and what happened and et cetera, and how did that work and things like that. So you'll not only learn from what your judge is exposed to, but also what other judges are doing in the courthouse. Those of you who might be coming on next year with us, frankly, I think you're going to get very lucky, because of COVID-19, the clerks who have worked for us this year have not had as many trials. As we do a lot of hearings, we do a lot of video conferencing, a lot of stuff like you're doing today. And frankly, I don't think it has necessarily the import and the humanity to it that an in-person appearance does. So we've done a few trials in the context of COVID-19 and some in-person proceedings, but they're not at the pace it was. The result of that is that we have a huge backlog. So at some point, there'll hopefully be a vaccine that will allow us to return to normal or somewhat normal operations, and we're going to be catching up on that backlog. To give you some sense of just on the criminal side, ordinarily we would have somewhere around 300 open cases on pretrial release. I think right now we here June or July. Then we're also got the people who are in custody. Because I'm a chief criminal judge, I can tell you exactly what's happening with that. But that same phenomenon is happening all across the board. Nobody wants to try their medical malpractice case right now. Nobody wants to try. Some family law cases are proceeding, but it's not in the context of being able to call witnesses in a courtroom. It's over a video. A lot of those are backlogged, especially the more complex ones. So come when the dam finally opens next year, we're going to be really, really busy. So if you're here next year, you'll probably get a very intensive view of a lot of trial work, would be my expectation of things. Let's see, what else is there? Why else would you do this job? I guess, to me, it really all comes down to that sense of feeling comfortable being in a courtroom. The folks who are clerks here who go on to other litigation related technique proceedings, you can see the difference in how they feel in a courtroom. They're more comfortable. They're not as frightened by it. They've had a chance to see what it is behind the scenes. They, and they do a much better job. They're have a little bit more poise. They have a little bit more sense of decorum. They have a little bit more sense of how things work, how to get along with clerks, who you need to talk to get things done. It'll be a really good insight for you if you're all interested in litigating. And if you're not even certain you're interested in litigating, or being a trial lawyer, you might come here and go, oh, never mind. I don't want to do that. Not interested at all. That's one of the nicest things about the law. It opens a lot of doors, and it's a powerful tool in all kinds of different ways to use it. You don't have to be a trial lawyer. Although I highly recommend it. I love it. I'm happy to talk about trial strategy, techniques at any time. Listen to this about how to do this or that. And even if you don't do a clerkship, if you are interested in any kind of litigation stuff, as soon as you should go watch some trial stuff. Nice thing about this is you get paid to watch it, and then you also get paid to talk about what worked and what didn't and how effective it was, and look at how we make decisions. And I think in the long run that'll benefit you if you're interested at all in litigation. So that's it for my prepared remarks. I guess there's some deadlines. They handed this to me right before I came in here, so I wouldn't tell you what the wrong deadlines were. So I guess your applications are due by December 7th at 5 p.m. And we do interviews in February. The February interviews are kind of brutal. I'll just warn you right now. What happens is you go down to a conference room. There are anywhere between 12 and 15 judges in that conference room. You come in and park yourself at the end of a big table there, and you get 5 minutes. That's it, 5 minutes, maybe 6, to talk about something and answer questions from the variety of judges. And some of them, I would have been nervous wrecked if I had been asked to do that. And I'm actually usually pretty impressed with the poise by which people do it. But it is just a chance for us to see the applicants, to put a face to the application. We've had a chance to review your applications in advance. And I will tell you that only, a certain number of people, there's just a certain number of slots we have available to do that for. So depending on the applicant pool, maybe not everybody will get a chance to do that. But just because you didn't get the chance to participate in that doesn't mean you're out of the running. Every year, a number of people get hired who aren't part of that original come on in and talk to us thing. So just be aware that that's the case too. Just because you don't get invited to that or you can't make it to that doesn't mean you're out of the running. We do have one rule, however, in the selection process. You have to, we select clerks in order of seniority. So the most senior judge goes first. Nowadays, that's Judge Holland. She will have her first choice of who she's going to appoint. You cannot turn down an offer from a more senior judge in hopes of getting to a different judge in the pool. If that judge offers you a job and you turn it down, then you're out. That's all there is to it. And the other thing I'd say is take heart. I always interview at least 3 people and sometimes 4, and then I'll pick one. It's always one of the hardest things I do. I call everybody up and tell them, I'll tell you, most of you have a far better resume than I did at the time that I graduated from law school. And you're very accomplished folks and very poised, and I'm really always impressed. And it's one of the hardest decisions I make because it has a big impact. You have to work with my staff closely for a year. That's the other thing I should have mentioned. It's not just me and my clerk, all right? It's me, my clerk, and my judicial assistant. And my judicial assistant is actually who you work with the most. And Ms. Panter has been a judicial assistant in this courthouse, so she can tell you a little bit more about how that works from their perspective. But that's the person who will more directly be giving you direction. You know, when I envisioned a clerkship back in the days before I came here, I would have thought of it more as, you know, sitting at the elbow of the judge, working together with the books open, reading and sitting around and talking about the law and the theory of it. The reality of it is, a lot of it is processing paperwork, getting people from point A to point B. In a day of Zoom meetings, making sure everybody's logged in and set up and it's ready to go and the recording device is ready and we can hear everybody. There's a ton of logistical work that you do, and and some things that are other duties as assigned that are less than glamorous and may not require, actually don't require at all any kind of law training, but are things that need to get done. And that partnership between you and the judicial assistant is really important because they, in a lot of ways, are your boss. You keep them happy, you'll keep everybody happy. It is a team thing. We work really hard. Anybody who works for me knows that we do a lot of work, and I expect a lot of my folks to get work done and push a lot of work out, but we have a good time. And it's really that dynamic of working as part of that 3-person team is really important. The other thing is every year the clerks give out an award, or I forget what it's called. They have a name for it. And maybe when Whit comes in here in just a little bit, he can tell you what it's called. But it's for getting a chance to work with the first clerk who gets to work with all the judges. So just because you're partnered with, assigned to one judge or hired by one judge, doesn't mean that's the only person you'll ever work with. A lot of times there's a lot of coverage going on here. People are out, so you go in and cover for them. It happens quite a bit. And well, I won't say most, but I'll say many of the clerks get a chance to work with all of the judges, at least who are in this building. It's a little harder sometimes if you're over in juvie to get over here very much, or vice versa if you're here to get over to juvie. That's sometimes a more difficult mix, although that's actually changed in the last couple of years because we have a lot more judges going over to juvie to do certain kinds of hearings, conflict hearings, or certain kinds of proceedings. So there's more turnover there, more mixing of those 2 courthouses as well. All right, I'm going to ask Whit to come on over, and while he comes on over, I'm going to stop talking for a minute, see if any of you have any questions, and Whit will probably talk to you a little bit about what it's like from his perspective, go through the process and the benefits of having a job and then maybe answer any inside questions you have. But I'd be happy to take some questions right now while we're waiting if anybody has any.
Looks like Joel has a question.
Judge, I was curious what the operations of Lane County were going to look like next year, if it was if the clerkship would be remote, or if there are any plans for anything different.
It wouldn't be remote. My clerks are here. All right. The clerks are here in the building. My team has been here the entire pandemic. We haven't I think I worked at home from home 5 or 6 days total in the entire time. We've been, some of the judges, because of health issues, have chosen to work remotely. The clerks generally, though, are here in the courthouse, even when the clerks are working remotely. And none of our clerks are working remotely because anything we do on the record. The recording devices and that equipment and the storage of all that is here in the building. So the clerk, at the very least, there are a couple chambers right now where the only person from that chamber here is the clerk. I've been trying to help them not feel so alone, but you won't be working remotely. I assure you of that.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else before Whit comes up here and I get out of this seat? And now he just walked in the room. I got to put my mask on, comply with the Chief Justice order. Anybody else? Nope. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Whit. I'm going to let him sit up here and he'll talk to you a little bit and answer any questions you may have about the process. And then I'll be sitting over here in the corner listening. So don't say anything too nasty. And we'll see if we can answer. If there's anything else you need from us.
Before you step down, Sarah had put her hand up, and I don't know if she still has a question.
Yeah, I'm also happy to ask Whit, but I'm curious because you mentioned one of the differences between working at the circuit court and state appellate courts is the pace. And I'm curious if you can think of any experiences or feedback you've heard from externs or from your own experience about whether there are other differences between the work style and just the work environment between those appellate level and then circuit court experiences.
I might leave that, since I've never clerked for an appellate court and never even, other than to step in front of an appellate panel or a Supreme Court panel to make an argument, I've never been on the inside of that. So I really couldn't tell you that. But I don't know, Ms. Ivanoff, if you've done both, then you can share, and she certainly has talked to a lot of people who've done both and can share more about that. So maybe I'll let her answer that question, and then while Whit and I switch seats here, okay?
Thank you.
Great question, Sarah. So what I would say is that certainly at the appellate level, the Oregon Court of Appeals is an equally busy court, but it's a different type of work. Right? So at the trial court level, your job, as you heard from the judge, is really to protect the integrity of the process, serve as the face of the courtroom. You are interfacing with litigants and attorneys and running the record, collecting evidence during trials, and Whit can talk more about this day to day. So what you're really observing and participating in is justice at the trial court level. At the appellate level, excuse my colleague here who's making an appearance, at the appellate level, your job is really to prepare the panel, help the judges prepare for oral argument. So you're researching the records, you're doing kind of bench memos, helping them prepare for oral argument. You'll certainly sit in on that oral argument, and then depending on which judge in the rotation is assigned the opinion, you're going to meet with your judge and then take the first steps, usually towards drafting that opinion. It's a real iterative writing process. It's very intensely focused on research and writing in a way that I would say the day-to-day experience of a trial court level clerk is not. It can often be a more solitary experience as well. I mean, certainly chambers work collaboratively, but it's more with a research and writing focus, more kind of individual, I would say, in the work style. Then at the Supreme Court level, where it's not an appellate court of right, you're helping the judges evaluate the petitions, determine which cases that the court should hear, again, writing kind of bench memos to help them prepare for argument, helping after argument then write the opinions. So there's a very different focus, I would say, in the day-to-day work. I hope that helps. And we can talk more at the end of the program as well. Whit, do you want to go ahead and share your experiences now? And I don't know if you were on, I gave a little brief introduction about your background, but please feel free to share anything about that as well.
I was listening from across the way. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Whitman Koch. I'm Judge Zennache's current law clerk. I'm very fortunate to be that. So I've been working here for almost 2.5 months now. I started right at the end of August, right at the beginning of September. And it's been really fun. You kind of get thrown in right away because we can't just like pause and be like, clerks, you're going to do training for 14 days and the court will do nothing but train you for 14 days. The court has to function. So you got to try to get on the train and learn how to function with it, which is kind of, it's a fun learning experience to have to kind of go through that. And then the thing that I'm also been really fortunate because I'm one of the only 2 clerks so far who's actually gotten to do 2 in-person trials. So that's been a lot of fun watching trial. I really like criminal law. That's one of the kind of the 2 areas of the law I'm really passionate about. So it's also very fun to be able to work for the chief criminal judge and be able to watch criminal trials and see how that goes. And then I guess when you're in trial, kind of going back to Sarah's question a second ago, the clerk is there to kind of keep track of exhibits, to make sure the record's playing and recording and picking up everything, and kind of helping attorneys with, did that get admitted the day yesterday or did it not, and things like that. Fun. And then as a clerk, you get to sit and watch folks litigate, which is interesting because I think it does really kind of remove the veil a little bit of like this big mysterious thing that seems insanely hard to do. And then you sit there and you start to kind of get familiar with the facts of the case and you do it. I also want, just for the record, to note that I'm super uncomfortable because I don't like sitting at the judge's bench, but this is where we are now because of COVID. So that's one of the really other great benefits of it. And then the other thing that I found just from the last couple of months of working is that it's really useful to learn kind of how the courthouse works. Because I think that for me, I just had a lot of experience at the federal level, which is super slow. And it doesn't, you do research and you take your time at trial, and jury selection can take, will always take a day. No matter what, even if it's a 2-day trial, it will still be a day of jury selection. And the thing that I really appreciate about being able to come into a state circuit court is that your assumptions about how things work, or at least my assumptions about how things worked, were really kind of changed based off of the fact that jury selection can be 6 weeks if it's for some types of cases. It can also be 2 hours. It all depends upon what the case is, how it's going, and how it moves. And then also learning about all of the different dockets and options that you have for, defendants in a criminal context, respondents in a civil context is really helpful too, because I think it's really helpful to know like what drug court is and how it works and who does it, than just being an attorney that taught to another attorney about what drug court is and who does it. And that's a really useful thing. So does anyone else have any questions and stuff? Sorry, I'm talking a lot.
Whit, can you give a little bit of perspective on your process of going through the application process and the interview process? We heard from Judge Zennaché about the 15 judges to 1 clerk kind of interview context. Do you have any tips about that, and anything to share with potential applicants about how to stand out? And I would also note that if people have externed before, what would you say about encouraging them to reach out to the court and let them know they're going to apply?
I can't speak to externing because I did not extern with a judge. I did a clerkship, well, not the clerk, I did the DA class, but that's all I did in the circuit court. What I can say is to take a deep breath before you go into that room if you get the opportunity to go into that room, is really useful. Actually, Judge Zennache's former clerk told me to do that before we went in the room, and that was the best piece of advice that Amanda gave me on that day, just because it's really daunting. There's 15 judges who are all very, very good at questioning people because they're judges and they do this for a living. And it's not the most, so taking a deep breath and just kind of, answering quickly, answering directly, and just thinking through your answers is useful. I think in terms of how to shine, I think just trying to be yourself is probably the thing to do there. I think that, as Judge Zennaché said, although there's a lot of stuff that requires you to have a law degree and go to law school, but a lot of working in a courthouse is just like anywhere else. It's working as a team. So being, showing yourself as an individual and showing your personality isn't necessarily a bad thing to go and do.
Whit, excuse me, I might ask you a question. If you could talk to them about the camaraderie between all the clerks that are there together.
That's a huge thing where each clerk works for their chambers and that's the chambers they work for. But Judge Zennaché, I think, talked to you guys about the Around the World Award, which is going and covering all of the first person who goes and covers all of the judges in the courthouse wins the Around the World Award. To win that, you have to do something for the judge on the record. That can be as minimal as gaveling them in, but that you have to at least do something for them on the record. So you really have to also work with the other clerks, because like to move juries, it requires a bunch of clerks. So it's not, you're not just working with your chambers, you're working with a bunch of people, and that's a really useful thing, I think. And it's also, this current clerk class was, I think, fairly lucky because a lot of us went to law school together. So we knew each other before we got into the courthouse.
Looks like Shane has a question. Shane, go ahead.
Hey, Whit, good to see you again.
Hi, Shane.
Hey, so my question is, you're a couple months into your clerkship now. If you could go back to the beginning of August, right before you started, and give yourself like one piece of advice, what advice would you give yourself?
Always be flexible, and the needs of the court is going to change on any given day based off of what's coming through the door on that day. And so for us, it's one of those things where you're always working. The quicker you accept that you don't necessarily know how your day is going to go, you're just going to have to keep pushing through, is a really useful thing. That would be my piece of advice for myself.
Looks like Shannon has a question.
I know you said that you were interested in criminal law, but how often do you get to view civil proceedings?
So there are some civil proceedings I get to see every day. Those are civil, not every day, but those are civil commitments, but those are for folks who are getting committed civilly for mental health reasons or something like that. I've also been able to see some divorce proceedings and deal with those kind of things, but because of COVID, that's been really restricted. Most times, I think Your Honor, right, it would be much more open in terms of civil proceedings and stuff like that going on.
And Whit, at what stage of the process were you asked about your interest, if at all, in criminal versus civil practice?
Do I have enough? I don't think no, Your Honor asked me, I think, during our interview, but that was it. It was more just like, what areas of the law are you interested in? Not in like are you a civil person or are you a crim person? Because I think at this, we're all young, either future lawyers or young lawyers. Like to say I am this is probably not the best thing. So you get to see a lot, which is always good.
Great. Does anybody have a question for just Whit at this point, or should we go back to kind of open questions for both Judge and Whit? Looks like Morgan has a hand up.
Yeah, Whit, you talked a little bit about the Around the World Award, and you've been there for 2-ish months now. How many judges have you gotten to help out now?
I am at, yes, they can, Your Honor. I am at 5. No, I'm at 6. I'm in the lead. I took the lead. Sorry, this is a big deal. I took the lead with a thing I did for Judge McIntyre. So there you go.
So I'm going to go back and just touch base with a couple of things that Whit said to you. One of the things that COVID-19 has done for all of us is made it a lot harder to have social interactions. So some of the clerk groups in the past have done things like have lunch together once a week. They've done, they've had parties together. They've done some things that build an esprit de corps. It's variable for each year, so, and it's not anything the court really requires them to do, but it's certainly something we and like to see. But it really is variable. This year's clerk group really hasn't had a chance to do much of that because of the restriction on COVID-19. And then I also want to echo what he said about on the civil side of things, to a large extent, not other than family law and some really, got to have an immediate danger kind of situation or restraining order or something, temporary protect PTO. A lot of the civil side are trying not to have trials go on in the COVID-19 environment, because whether you're the defendant or the plaintiff, there's an idea that, hey, coming to trial, we're making the jury come sit through this right now is not going to be good for us. So there's just a real absence of that right now. But that doesn't mean it's gone away. It's all there waiting to happen. And as soon as the COVID-19 thing gets to a point where we can resume some slightly more normal operations, we're going to be really busy doing all kinds of cases and all kinds of things. The other thing I want to say about that is, I'm the chief criminal judge. There's 4 judges on the crim team. So we rotate an morning assignment that involves a lot of criminal procedure stuff. And I oversee how that stuff gets done. And then I kind of get the oddball stuff, not softball, the oddball stuff. There's a civil team that does the same thing. There's an equity team that deals with equitable stuff. That doesn't mean that's all you do, though. That means if your judge is on that team, you're going to be doing a lot of that stuff as part of the morning. But all of us are general judges of general jurisdiction, and we hear all kinds of cases. That's one of the things I love about this job. I have a little bit of ADD, so the pace is pretty intense, but so is the diversity of the case stuff, and it always keeps your mind active. It's like, okay, today I'm going to do a malpractice case. Now I'm going to do a business, commercial litigation fight about whether or not somebody built the building wrong or not. Whose fault is it that they did this? This building is starting to rot now when it shouldn't be. Or now I'm going to do a murder. It's really a fascinating diversity, and you'll get a chance to do that. Hopefully, you guys will get a chance to do it in person a little bit more intensely than what's getting, unfortunately, right now because of the restrictions on operations. All right, so we're both here. We're both wearing our masks. Any other questions?
Jen, I'd love to actually check in with you on what I asked Whit, because historically, at least, it was my understanding that there was a physical binder of application materials that used to travel among chambers, and people would kind of make a tick mark next to the candidates they were interested in speaking with. And that was how people got invited to kind of that larger scale 15 judge interview process. But then, as you said, recruitment happens in order of seniority, and judges have the option of calling in anybody from that earlier session or anybody from the book. Is that still, I recognize it probably happens in a digital environment now, but is that still kind of the method?
That is still kind of the method, but like you said, it's all digital now. We don't pass a book around. I get a bunch of PDFs in a queue, and then I read through them and then identify on a list who I'd like to see interviewed, and we all do that independently. And then you got to get whatever the threshold is. There's 15 slots or 7 slots. I don't know, how many people we actually interview in a day, and whoever gets whatever number of votes it takes to get you in that top threshold, you get the interview, but it doesn't mean necessarily you're out.
Right. And then for candidates who have externed in the court before or might be familiar with the clerks who are there, it's my understanding that a lot of judges will turn to their JA and their clerk and say, is there anybody that's applying that you think I should be paying attention to? And so to that extent, do you think it would be worth it for candidates to reach back out to their prior chambers to let them know they're intending to apply?
So the clerkship, I'll break it into 2 parts. Yes, I certainly do that. I ask my clerk and my JA, and I ask actually other clerks, what do you know about the people who are on this list? Anybody know any of these people? What can you tell me about them? Because let's face it, I'm picking somebody who's going to have to work with me and Audra for a year at least. And I want that person to be somebody who's going to fit and is going to get something out of this, and is somebody who's going to be able to do the work that needs to get done. And you all make very nice resumes. Oftentimes they're very similar because if you're complying with, you know, the advice you're getting, and it's hard to tell who's who. So it's helpful for me to have some of that little inside look into what you're like elsewhere in the court, in your world. As far as, you know, you're an extern and you extern with a judge, it doesn't hurt you to let the judge know, but we'll know. We're going to see your name on the list. We'll know, oh, yeah. And whenever one of our externs is on that list, we'll talk about that, you know, extern and how they did when they were here. So that's sort of a glimpse. I don't know how many of you, because we haven't had an externship program, I don't know of any. Mr. Drew, I think I've seen you before, but I don't know about the rest of you. Okay, Mr. O'Connell. But Ms. Early, did you raise your hand too? No. Yes, you did. Okay. So, you know, your judges will know that, and they'll talk about it when we, you know, most people list that in their resume. And when we're reviewing the resumes together, we'll go, hey, you know, so I see that Morgan clerk for you or extern for you. What do you think of her? How'd she do? You know, what are her strengths? What are her weaknesses? Anything you want to tell me about her, kind of thing. It always bugs me when someone hires my extern before I get a chance to, but it has happened. But I'm getting more senior now. I'm number 4, so not likely to happen right now.
Judge, a question came up.
Sorry. Go ahead.
A question came up about optional writing samples. So this year we saw that it's optional for a candidate to submit a writing sample with their application. Do you have any thoughts on what the advantages or disadvantages might be for a student considering including a writing sample?
I would just, the only thing I would say is it's probably variable with the judges as to how much they weigh the writing sample you submit, or even whether they look at it. You know, I don't put a lot of cotton in the writing samples because I figure it's something that you've spent tons of time working on. You might have had somebody else help you edit, and it's probably your best work. I take some look at them, but it's not my primary thing. I'm more interested in their resumes and what they've done with their life and why it is they want this job. What is it they're hoping to get out of the job? You know, because a lot of what we do is not research and writing. A lot of it is, hey, Whit, go find me the most recent cases on this. Or I remember there's a case that came out last year that talked about this issue. I can't remember the name of it. I'm terrible, as Ms. Ivanoff will assure you, with the names of cases. But I remember the content, the holding of it or the nature of it, and they'll go out and find. Sometimes I kind of got it off, so you got to figure out which of the 5 cases might be involved, you know, and come back. So it's much more. There isn't at our level. There isn't as much writing. That said, I think some of my colleagues actually put a lot of emphasis on writing skills. You know, like I know Judge Holland, and I think to some extent Judge Carlson. I think work hard, look at that because they do a lot of the civil stuff, and that's important to them. But sorry, that was a long-winded answer to a short question. Sorry.
That's okay. It looks like Shannon has a question. Shannon, go ahead.
In regards to cover letters, what do you look for in a cover letter, or what would you like to see highlighted?
Why you want this job? What is it you hope to get out of it? What is something that tells me a little bit about what's motivating you? You know, one of the questions I always ask people coming in to interview with me is, why'd you go to law school? What is it you hope to get? Tell me a little bit about your background. Tell me, you know, I know they tell you in law school, don't talk about jobs you have that aren't necessarily law related, but part of this job is not law related. It's people management. And I want to know, you know, have you had to deal in a restaurant with a waitress? If you're in a waitress, you've probably had to deal with all kinds of people, with some who are happy and some who aren't, and you know, I had to do it diplomatically. So that's helpful for me to know a little bit about you. But I wouldn't put that in my cover letter, okay? Back to your question. I think why you want the job, what you hope to get out of it is really important. That's really important. Something that makes you, tells me what's different about you, makes you stand out a little bit. got to walk a fine line now. You can't be like, hey, I'm the greatest thing since sliced white bread, and if you hire me, you're going to get, brilliant lawyer who's going to come in and right the ship and make everything work. No.
So Judge, you raise a good point about inclusion of non-legal jobs. And I know I've heard this from you. I've heard this from our current presiding judge in Lane County, that she does not want to wait until the interview to find out that someone, say, worked at McDonald's or, grew up, bucking hay and from the time they were 8 years old. And so really it can show that they've had a diversity of work experiences and have that kind of strong work ethic. Is there anything else you'd like to say about inclusion of maybe non-law positions on the resume and the value of at least including it there or talking about it in the interview?
No, I just think that that's important. We are a people business. That's what we do, is we work with people. I want somebody who's going to treat everybody who comes in here with respect, who's had some experience at not such decent things, have had to do some nasty jobs, so that when somebody comes in here and they're hassled because they just got here from work and their clothes are dirty and they're just barely, and they got to run out and feed the meter, you're not too high and mighty that you can't talk to them and treat them with respect and dignity, because that's really the most important job, is to treat everybody with respect and dignity who shows up here.
It looks like, Judge, we have one last question, and that's from Shane. Shane, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you, for your honor, for talking with us. I think you kind of just answered it a little bit, but my question was going to be, what are the most successful qualities that you've seen, or what are the qualities that you've seen in your most successful clerks?
Willingness to do almost anything, not being too full of yourself, and being willing to, like I said, you work a lot with the judicial assistant. Most of the judicial assistants haven't gone to law school, but they know a lot about how the system works and what they need you to do, and you need to listen and do what you're told by them, and not think you're no better than them or just beneath you. A willingness to take on things, to boldly go. Some of my clerks I've had in the past who haven't been particularly successful are people who are so afraid of making a mistake, or so need it to be perfect that they're not willing to try. You can't be paralyzed by perfection, I like to say. You need to be willing to just go with it, and do the best you can in an uncertain environment. Being smart is helpful. Being able to talk about the law is helpful. Those are things that I look for that maybe not my JA cares so much about, but I care about, is how well versed are you in the law, things like that. I don't expect you to know what at the level I do, or even if somebody's been a lawyer for 5 years, you're brand new. You guys have just been trained about how to think like a lawyer. You haven't had a whole lot of experience, but those are things that are helpful to me.
Great. And I know you have to go to a hearing in just a minute. Any final thoughts that either you, Judge, or Whit, you'd like to share with the candidates?
Oh, I guess one thing I would share is I actually did include relating back to the 2 questions ago, I did include one of my jobs I had before law school, which was I was a duck tour tour guide in Boston growing up. So it was one of those things where it's a fun job that I did. And it's a fun talking point to an interview. Like, seriously, you did duck tours? Like, yep, I was a tour guide. There you go. So it's always fun times.
Great. Well, I want to just thank you both.
I want to say one thing. I would really urge you, if you're thinking at all about litigation, or you're just thinking about, hey, I don't know what I want to do as far as the future, that this is a great spot to come and look at what it is like to be a trial lawyer, what it's really like to be in the trenches. As Whit said, on the federal side, you're not going to get nearly as much experience or exposure. It's going to be much more of a slower pace. This is a very fast pace. You'll see a lot of stuff. I can't think of anything more rewarding for a young person to do out of law school than to do this for a year and get a sense of what it's like. I mean, it's different if you're going to be making $100,000 a year in some private law firm. Maybe that's your thing and you got to pay your student debt, and I got it, and that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that. But this is a great chance to kind of get a view of how things work, and that's all.
Great. Well, Judge, thank you so much. I know you have to go. Students, I'll stay on just for a second to see if you have any additional questions. We really appreciate your time, Judge Zennaché and Whit. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much. Good luck, you guys. Stay safe.
Take care.
Bye, Judge.